disclaimer from the beginning. So this will be recorded and no one's face is going to be seen. No one's names are necessarily going to be seen unless we're just trying to specify comments or questions that people might ask. But other than that, we can get started. So just make sure you are also being appropriate in the chat and the Q&A. If we believe that anything is inappropriate or there's excessive profanity, we're going to need to possibly remove you from the program. So please make sure that you are being appropriate. This is a family program. But all right, cool. So let's get started. So just in case you cannot see me on this screen, you can always kind of move on your Zoom on your side to change where my face is. I noticed that some people have that problem, so I just kind of wanted to address that early on. All right. Ooh. So like I said, we are going to be talking about animal defenses. And here's my contact info. I'll go back to it at the end, just in case anyone wants to message me with more questions or anything like that, so that you have that for future reference. So today we're going to be learning about a couple different things. First is to identify venomous and poisonous animals of Nevada and also to be able to tell the difference. Second is to learn about other ways that animals defend themselves besides venomous and poisonous. And then also to know how we can protect ourselves from injury with these animals. And then lastly, to understand the unique challenges that we as biologists must overcome to safely handle and observe these animals. And there will also be a fun activity at the end. And also, I just forgot to mention, but with me is Amanda. She is my AmeriCorps partner. She'll be answering any questions that come up or anything that you might have, making sure everything kind of goes smoothly if there's any technical difficulties or anything. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that as well. All right, so let's talk real quick about some of the terminology that we will have. So I'll be talking a lot about venom, and people tend to get these two things confused. So venom is a poisonous substance that is secreted by animals. Poison is just basically the overall term for something that is toxic. So poison can be, something can be poisonous, but not necessarily venomous. So we use those two a little interchangeably. Venom can be poisonous, but poison cannot be venomous. All right, and then also intraspecific competition, which is competition between individuals of the same species. Interspecific competition, which is going to be competition between different species. And then adaptation, which is a physical trait or behavior that helps an animal to survive. So these are all going to be a little bit of what we talk about that you might not have heard before this lesson today. All right. So we're going to learn about a few different types of animals. I've already talked about kind of the venomous and poisonous. So we're going to be learning about those venomous and poisonous reptiles, how they defend themselves, and what they do actually to subdue their prey. Insects to avoid. So these are just some insects, their defenses that they use against some larger predators, including humans. And then some mammals that we might encounter that use different defenses, as well as some of our horned mammals that use various defenses with their horns and hooves. So first, we're going to talk about venomous and poisonous reptiles. And I'll just put out a quick poll. So I'm just curious to know with everyone who is joining us tonight, what is your experience with viewing rattlesnakes in Nevada? That's going to be a huge topic that we talk about. So maybe you don't know we had rattlesnakes, maybe you have worked frequently with them, maybe you've never even encountered one. So I'm just curious as to what people might say about that. So I'll give everyone a minute to do that. All right, awesome. So let's see. Looks like most people have never seen one, but know that they're here, and some people have encountered them before. And then a few people have worked frequently with them or encountered them. I'm glad that everyone knows that we do have rattlesnakes here in Nevada, because that is a big subject of what we're talking about today. All right. So we have a couple different venomous reptiles in Nevada. Let's see, roughly about 12 of our 52 reptile species in Nevada are going to be poisonous. 6 of those are dangerous to humans. And also, when I say poisonous, I actually technically mean venomous. It means that they are capable of emitting poison. And then in addition, so reptiles in this case are going to be secreting venom from their fangs. And there are other reptiles that secrete poison from their skin. So there is a difference, and we'll kind of get on that and talk about it. So with our rattlesnakes here in Nevada, a couple things that all of our rattlesnakes do, all of our Nevada rattlesnakes are pit vipers. And when we say pit vipers, it means that they have these pits that are just under their eyes that allow them to sense heat. And this allows them to hunt prey. They also have a broad head and a rattle. And when I say a broad head, I more or less mean it's kind of almost like a spade shape. So it's kind of like about this shape. And it's very identifiable with our rattlesnakes as opposed to other snakes, which maybe have like a round head that might be kind of more like this, or even just kind of like a head with a very blunt nose on it. So there are differences between some of the different snake heads that you'll see in Nevada snakes. And the rattles are also going to be very prevalent on these snakes, given their name. So they have what we call rattles or buttons, and that's made of keratin. And one thing that's pretty cool about the buttons is that they actually will gain buttons when they shed. So it's kind of a way that we can age them, although snakes can lose buttons, and also they may shed several times a year. So it's not really a reliable way to age our snakes. And also these pit vipers are going to be injecting venom through fangs that fold into the top of the mouth. And this is kind of a good image of what it looks like. So those fangs will technically be closed to the top of the mouth when they're not being used. And then when they're opened, they will swing out from the top and they will be able to be used. And we actually can use snake venom for a number of things. So with rattlesnake venom, it can be used actually to create antivenom and also to treat a number of things. One thing I found was very interesting is that it can be used against certain parasites. So protozoa that might inject what we call a disease that results in leishmaniasis is one thing that our rattlesnake venom can be used for. Another thing is it is actually kind of used in a way to do cancer treatments. So there are certain ways that we can get this venom from the snakes. Mostly just involves kind of pressing up a vial to the snake's fangs and kind of leaking out that venom. So it's really cool, all the different uses that we can have for it. And we'll get into the different types that we have here. So number one is our sidewinder. And the sidewinder is going to be found in southern Nevada. It's going to be leaving those S or J shapes in the sand, which are pretty obvious of a sidewinder. No other snake really does that. And often they'll hide directly under loose sand and just out of sight. So when you're walking around, you want to be careful to look for something that kind of looks like a coiled up snake that's just under the sand. And some people ask, well, why does it do this sidewinder behavior? So it actually kind of moves in a very weird way. It's to not have as much contact with the hot sand. I guess it could be comparable to if you're on the beach on a hot day and you don't want to burn your feet, so you start interchanging feet, and kind of like running in place. They do the same thing so that they don't lose a lot of moisture to the sand and they can maintain their body heat. They also have these very obvious modified scales above their eyes that look just like horns, and I'll kind of reference it here. So that's kind of a sidewinder face up close. So that's a good way to identify our sidewinder. In addition, we have the Mojave rattlesnake or the Mojave green snake. So they have a couple different names. This one can have a different coloration depending on, I guess, just that's genetics. So they're usually dark brown diamonds with yellow bordering, but sometimes the sides can be an olive or light green color. The tail is going to have the striped black and white bands that are easy to identify, and they have this bright bluish purple tongue that flashes out, which is kind of a warning sign. It's how you know that you are definitely dealing with a very aggressive snake. And it's going to warn with a rattle in most cases. So if you ever approach a rattlesnake and they're rattling, they're doing you a favor. They're letting you know that they're there, and they're letting you know, hey, I know you're bigger than me, so please don't hurt me. So we also want to be aware they will never rattle when they want to attack something. They're trying to be as sneaky as possible. So when they are rattling, it's a good thing because it means that they identify you and that they don't want you to come closer. And these Mojave rattlesnakes also have extremely potent venom. They are the most dangerous rattlesnake in the United States. So if you are bit by this rattlesnake, you want to seek medical help immediately. I mean, you do want to seek medical help immediately, regardless of which rattlesnake you were bitten by, but this one especially. And there's a little close up of their black and white tail, kind of what I had put on the previous slide, but it's kind of going to look like this white and black banding. All right. So then we're going to move on to the speckled rattlesnake. The speckled rattlesnake is going to have this salt and pepper speckled banding. It's the only one of our rattlesnakes in this case that has this really cool banding. They also have that black and white tail as well. They're going to mostly just hang out in Southwest and Central Nevada. Most of our snakes will be down there. The only one that is not is the Great Basin rattlesnake, and the rest will also be in Southern Nevada. And there are actually 2 subspecies that live here in the States. So the Mitchellii species, and then there's another one that I didn't put on here, but 2 of them live here. Just one is not as common. We also have the Western diamondback rattlesnake. And the funny thing about the Western diamondback is it looks really similar to our Mojave rattlesnake. The best way to tell the difference is that it's going to be larger, but it's kind of hard to tell unless you have them side by side. And it's going to deliver a really large volume of venom. Well, you wouldn't want to know that unless you got bit. So that's the difference. But it has a lighter coloration than the Mojave rattlesnake and also has that similar black and white banding on the tail, except the banding's a little bit chunkier. So whereas the Mojave rattlesnake has more of a kind of thinner stripe, just like the speckled, it's going to be different this time because it's going to be a little thicker. All right. And lastly, we have our Western rattlesnake or the Great Basin rattlesnake. And this one is going to be pretty widely distributed, but mostly occurring in northern Nevada. So it's definitely special because it's not like the other ones that are going to be in a hot environment. It's mostly a gray and light brown coloration with those gray blotches that are surrounded in a darker color like a black or a dark gray. And the subspecies is most represented in the state. So there's the most amount of this species in the state. And lastly, it's also just a generalist and for diet and habitat. So that's why it can occur in northern Nevada. It can survive the cold temperatures up here. It doesn't really need a whole lot of a specific food source. It can, vary greatly with its diet and also enjoys a number of habitats. So I would say that the Western rattlesnake is definitely the most variable in terms of how well it can survive. All right, so that's it for rattlesnakes, but does anyone have any questions about rattlesnakes before I move on? Let me check. Do you know why they have a black and white tail? I would assume this has to do with warning coloration. So basically, this has to do with, so if you have any kind of species that wants to prey on a rattlesnake, so let's see, maybe eagles or hawks, some owls might want to, some larger mammals might want to also prey on these rattlesnakes. It's kind of a coloration that says, hey, I'm really venomous, so don't eat me. And a lot of animals use this kind of black and white coloration. Most prominently, the skunk uses this too. And some other salamanders and newts will also use a black and white coloration, which is warning them that they're definitely poisonous or venomous and you don't want to touch them. So, all right, so next is the Gila Monster. The Gila Monster is really cool. It's honestly one of my favorite reptiles that we have in Nevada. It is the lone venomous lizard, and it's actually protected in the state of Nevada, so it does have a protected status. And it's extremely elusive, which means it's really hard to find. And with that, the venom is going to be mixed with saliva and delivered through the lower jaw, through the teeth of the lower jaw. So it's honestly really unlikely that you would get bit by a Gila monster, given that they're so good at hiding. But if you do, it would most likely be an accident. Like you put your hand in a hole that they were in, or you put your foot in a hole that they were in. So that's kind of why you would get bit. But they have a speckled and banded pattern all over their body, which is going to be mostly black and this lighter orangish red color. And it's not to be confused with the chuckwalla, which looks a little similar and also occupies the same habitat. The chuckwalla is going to have a striped tail and also be more of a triangular shape, whereas the Gila monster is more of a cylindrical shape. So that's the easiest way to tell them apart. And also, I just want to talk real quick about those precautions. So make sure you're preventing an attack before it happens. Identify those warning signs. Definitely check signs before you go on a trail or a hike, and research where rattlesnakes occur to make sure that you're not going into their territory if you don't have to. They are going to usually release a rattle beforehand, so just make sure that you are kind of aware of that when you're out and about, and listen for that rattle. And then you always want to be aware when you're hiking, be cautious when placing your hands on rocks. That's usually how they get you, is that you're climbing on something, you reach up to grab a rock to pull yourself up, and there happened to be a rattlesnake chilling right there, sunning. So just make sure that you are always being careful before you put your hand up somewhere, and to check all crevices or under rocks, so just any hidden areas. You definitely want to keep your distance from animals. I've actually seen a Western diamondback rattlesnake when I was hiking one time, and it gave off a rattle before I saw it. And I just made sure to find out where it was. So I kind of scanned the area and looked for it. Once I saw it, I walked about like 3-4 feet further away from it than I already was, and gave it plenty of space so that I didn't have to have an encounter with it. And then if you're ever going to be camping at night, especially in the desert, just make sure you're using a flashlight. Just when you're hiking or camping, I know it can be really hot in the desert, so some people get up really early to go on hikes so that they can beat the sun. So just make sure that you are bringing a flashlight and scanning your area before you step on something. So what do you do if you're bitten? So there's a lot of myths regarding the rattlesnake bite. Some people say that you should cut the wound and suck it out. Some people say you should tourniquet. Do not do any of these. It can actually make it worse. So what you should be doing, you do want to make sure that you seek treatment immediately. And if possible, you want to identify which species actually bit you. Keep the wound below heart level and immobilize the victim if possible. So that's why it's always really important to try to hike or camp with a buddy if possible, or to let people know where you're going. So that if you don't come back on time, or if something's wrong, then you have someone that can help you, or someone who knows where you are. Also try to keep calm. Anxiety is going to cause your blood to rush through your system a lot faster, and it's going to cause the venom to circulate more quickly. So the best thing to do is, if you have a buddy, you would want to, if you have a buddy that gets bit, you'd want to lay them down in a shaded area, have them immobilized, and possibly just like try to calm them down, give them plenty of water, keep them calm and everything like that while you go to get help, or try to find someone who can help bring them out, because you don't want them moving around a whole lot. And so this is a pretty good example of a rattlesnake bite. I actually got this from the singer Mike Posner. He had a rattlesnake bite earlier last year, and he actually had a huge swelling problem, and he couldn't walk for about 2 weeks. So these are definitely very severe. And some of the signs are, obviously you get a bite mark, but you do want to make sure that you're checking out for additional warning signs, and always just try to get treatment no matter how you feel, because the symptoms will come on very fast, if you ignore it. So it's just good to make sure that you are always being aware. But also don't panic, because less than 1% of bites result in death. So just make sure that you are staying calm. It could result in severe complications though, so definitely treat it with urgency, but also don't panic like crazy that you're going to die. Okay. So as biologists, we do also have to safely handle rattlesnakes, and this is for a number of reasons. Like I said before, snake venom can be used for certain things medicinally. But in addition, we have a number of ways that we monitor rattlesnakes. So the way that we do this is we pick them up carefully with tongs, or like in this picture, we have a cool little, you know, tong thing, like a gardening tool. And then you're going to put them in a bucket, and you're going to use a long tube to guide them into the tube. From there, they cannot turn around. They can only go forward, and that will immobilize their face so that they can't bite you. But they'll also remain calm, because they do prefer to be in something that is going to be, I guess, around them, wrapped around them, so they don't feel threatened. And the handler will be protected from its bite as well. And then while the snake is immobilized, biologists can count rattles, weigh them, take blood samples, and check for microchips. So we do this for a number of reasons. We need to survey them, make sure the population is healthy, and also just to make sure that nothing's going wrong in the population. Since snakes are apex predators, they're pretty good at giving us a good health analysis of the habitat. So they eat the most, with the trophic system, they're going to be getting the highest concentration of whatever toxins or poison is in the system of the environment. So we need to kind of check out what they're eating and make sure that nothing is getting severely poisoned or there's no toxic leaks or anything just happening and secreting into the environment. All right, so now that we're done kind of talking about those venomous ones, there are a couple that secrete poison, although it's mostly going to be some frogs and toads, and then all salamanders and newts. Newts and salamanders actually have this bright coloration, and I talked about that before, the warning coloration, and they produce a neurotoxin called tetrodotoxin, and that's pretty much secreted from the skin. So it's different from venom because venom has to be injected. So it is a poisonous substance that is injected, and the poison that is a neurotoxin is actually secreted from the skin. And whichever animal eats this, it can paralyze the heart and the lungs of any animal that's unlucky enough to consume it. But these animals are poisonous, not venomous, as I was just explaining. And the good thing about them is that they really aren't a harm to humans if you aren't eating them. So just make sure you're not going around eating newts and frogs, and you should be okay. But they can irritate the skin of someone who might be particularly sensitive to certain toxins. So you do need to make sure with that. So we only have 2 salamanders in Nevada. We don't have any known frog or toad species that are specifically poisonous necessarily. We do have plenty of frogs and toads, but they're not going to be considered poisonous. And these 2 toxic salamanders live in Nevada. So the western tiger salamander, which is this one. This one's going to live mostly just on the east end of Nevada in the particularly more wet regions. And then the Inyo Mountain salamander, which is only going to be seen on the west. So not really many salamanders in this state, but I just thought I'd include them because for the sake of talking about poisonous animals. All right, so now we're going to kind of get into our insects, and let me just make sure it doesn't look like we have any comments or questions. So that's good. Let's see. All right, cool. So with insects, there's a number of insects that affect all animals differently. So I was just going to mostly focus on insects that are pretty dangerous to humans and ones that people might be concerned about. So insects use a number of defense methods. So one thing that they use is stinging with venom, and this can be used by scorpions and spiders, and it can be delivered via stinger or fangs. So they have a couple different methods that they use to deliver this venom. They can also bite. So this is done with pincers, and it can be extremely painful just as much as being stung. And then they also have this thing called urticating hairs, which is really only in the tarantula. And it's basically these hairs on the back of the abdomen that are flicked off the body into the face or the mouth of either a person or an animal that might be trying to pursue the tarantula. So that is our stinger on a scorpion. And then this is the urticating hairs that I was talking about. So they're pretty obvious, and those will just definitely irritate. Mostly if you're a dog, dogs will definitely try to go after tarantulas because it's a weird moving thing. And a lot of dogs end up with urticating hairs in their nose and in their snout. All right. So we have 2 venomous spiders in Nevada. One is the black widow, and this one's pretty widespread around the United States to begin with. But this is going to be the Hesperus species. So black widows are identifiable by that red hourglass, and female black widows are the only ones that contain this crazy venom. There's a lot of myths surrounding black widows. One that's kind of funny is that black widows will eat their partner once they're done mating. That's not necessarily true. In fact, most of the time, male partners actually end up surviving after they've done their mating process. So it's not really a very big, it's not really well known in the scientific community, but that fact has changed. And then we also have the desert recluse, which is a subspecies of it's related to the brown recluse. This is a deserta species. And just a little warning, we're going to talk about some of the bites. So there might be a little bit of graphic imagery for, our bite wounds and everything like that. So if you're sensitive to any kind of medical terminology or like pictures or anything like that of bite wounds, just letting you know. So with the black widow, this is what a bite from the black widow would look like. So it's going to create this necrotic tissue. That's necrotic basically means dead tissue that will spread around the bite mark. And in most cases, the black widow bite will not be fatal unless you are elderly or a child or just go severely untreated and you might have severe complications. But a lot of the things that happen with a black widow bite is you might get nauseous, chills, vomiting, shaking, any kind of loss or delirium. So you might get tired or fatigued very easily. You might sleep a lot. That's going to be an issue with a black widow bite. However, if it's treated properly and given the proper medical attention, it shouldn't really result in anything crazy. It's just good to keep an eye on it. With the recluse, it's very similar. So it's going to result in some necrotic tissue that can spread if left untreated, and also is going to be more fatal, really only to maybe young children or elderly. It's really not fatal to everybody else. So just always good to keep those precautions to make sure that you're paying attention to the symptoms and identifying what happened and where possibly which spider did it. So a lot of the times, both the black widow and the recluse will leave a small mark with two fang marks basically in the skin, and then it will be more identifiable for treatment. And this also helps with delivering antivenom for anyone who maybe got bit. So it's good to identify if it's a black widow or a recluse if you can. Another insect that we have here is the bark scorpion. This is going to be in southern Nevada down by Las Vegas. And this is actually a pretty common pest in the Las Vegas area. So also be aware of that if you own a home in the Las Vegas area or down in southern Nevada, that the bark scorpion is definitely very common down there. So the bark scorpion is not too big. It's only about 2.5 inches in length, and it has pretty poor eyesight, which is why it relies on its venom to kill its prey. And once it does deliver its venom, usually that animal will die pretty quickly. But it is predated by larger tarantulas, lizards, birds, and owls. And due to its poor eyesight, it's really easy to swoop up and eat. So it's really good that we have tarantulas and lizards and birds to eat these awful scorpions. One other cool thing is that they have a fluorescent exoskeleton that can be detected by UV light. And this is pretty cool if you are, out camping, if you want to check for any bark scorpions in your tent or just around your campsite. I would definitely suggest bringing a fluorescent light and just checking for them. So this is what they look like. They're pretty small and they're mostly this all over yellowish brown color. And then this is kind of what they look like if you're shining a UV light on them. All right. So a little bit more about the bark scorpion. It has the most potent sting in the United States. So that's pretty interesting. There's a lot of different scorpions in the United States, but none are as potent as the bark scorpion sting. And it can cause severe complications in the elderly and children, most likely not death, but just severe complications, which might include difficulty breathing, muscle twitching, unusual head, neck, and eye movements, drooling, sweating, nausea, and vomiting, and also some swelling at the site. And this is kind of what that swelling will look like. So it'll swell up to kind of this dark red color and also have a little bit of necrosed tissue at the site of the bite or the sting. All right, so then we have a number of other dangerous insects as well. So one is kind of, this is called the sun spiders. So let's see. Oh. Okay, never mind, sorry. So let's see, someone said do black widows and brown recluse live at 7,000 feet? That's a great question. I'm in Reno and I have black widows in my area. The brown recluse does not, but I do believe black widows do. And someone also pointed out that that spiders and scorpions are not insects, they're arachnids. I was kind of just grouping them all together. So that's on my my end that I did that. I meant more like insects, arachnids, different types of groups of creepy crawlies. So I will fix that for next time. Thank you. All right, so we have what we call sun spiders. They're not really a spider. These are different. So they're actually a group, a family called Siliphiges. And they have large, powerful chelicerae that can cut through the skin and the bones of various animals. So this is a camel spider, which is definitely super creepy. And they actually scream when you approach them, or if they feel cornered, they'll let out a little screech noise and try to chase you, which is absolutely, I'm not dealing with that. So they're not really going to be, deadly or anything like that. They're just have a really painful bite. Also, we have the tarantula hawk, which is one of our wasps. So it attacks with a painful sting, and it's actually rated second most painful on the Schmidt Sting Pain Index. And they're generally avoided by all predators. Roadrunners are the only ones that can really stomach the tarantula hawk, but some wasps will definitely mimic the look of this tarantula hawk in order to not be predated by other animals. So they do have very interesting defenses in that aspect, that although tarantula hawks are very docile and actually will not sting, you can even hold them in your hand and they won't sting you. It's only unless they feel very threatened that they will. So ironic that they're extremely docile, but provide like one of the most, probably one of the most painful stings, the second most painful sting. Another one we're going to talk about is the desert centipede. So the desert centipede is just one I wanted to include. It is about 4 to 7 inches in length. This one is going to be found in the desert, obviously, so southern Nevada. It's going to deliver its venom through the front legs that are pinched together. So it's kind of a different form of delivering its venom. It's not going to be necessarily delivered through pincers or anything like that, just its legs. And it also will primarily consume soft-bodied animals like frogs and lizards, as well as some other softer insects. And it's kind of crazy because it can take down small lizards and will feast on them for a couple days. And the other one that we have is a desert tarantula. I just thought I would include this one as well because it uses a pretty interesting defense mechanism, although this is not dangerous to humans. It uses its urticating hairs that we talked about before, and that's to irritate predators that come after it. And one predator of the desert tarantula is actually the tarantula hawk that I talked about previously. And it's actually pretty cool because what the tarantula hawk will do is it will inject its larvae into a tarantula, and the larvae will eventually hatch out and use the tarantula as food once they hatch. So it's pretty gruesome and actually very cool. And the reason that desert tarantulas aren't very dangerous is they have extremely weak venom, so it can't really take out large prey easily. So it pretty much just hangs out with grasshoppers, bugs, beetles, other spiders and whatnot, just so that it can take on that smaller prey. It's usually not going to approach any larger prey. All right, so we've kind of talked about all the creepy crawlies and the poisonous animals, poisonous, venomous, everything like that. So they have some pretty interesting defense mechanisms, but mammals have to rely on a different type of defense mechanism. So we're going to talk about that real quick. And I just have a quick poll to go over. So there's a number of different mammals that live here, apex mammals specifically. And which ones do you think live in Nevada? So you can click off as many as you want, whatever you think lives here. So we got mountain lions, brown bears, black bears, wolves, grizzly bears, or lynx. So of those, which do you think live here? You can pick multiple because we do have multiple. Awesome. All right, so everyone's saying mountain lions. Looks like a lot of people are saying black bears as well. A lot of people are saying lynx. Okay. All right. So good job, everybody. So we actually, of this list, we only have 2 of these animals in the area. So we have the mountain lions and black bears. We do not have brown bears. Brown bears are going to be further north. We also do not have grizzly bears, and lynx also are not going to be in the state really. Lynx do come down a little further south. They can get down as far south as Idaho, but they don't really go into Nevada at all. So we wouldn't consider the lynx a mammal that we have here. All right, so predator behavior is going to be something that is definitely important to identify. So large predators such as bears and mountain lions are going to have frequent encounters with humans, and this is because they do tend to come into our areas, and we are also technically in their habitat as well. So we do have frequent clashes with these animals, but it's good to understand what you're up against. So the first thing is that all predators are going to have this acute senses. So all predators have forward-facing eyes. They might have enhanced sense of smell, enhanced sense of hearing. They're going to be able to tap into those senses a lot better. They have fast movement, so they're going to be very agile, be able to run very fast or climb very fast. They're often solitary, which is also a good thing because you're not going to run into a huge pack of mountain lions. You might just hit one or two, and you won't really hit a bunch of bears. Usually bears are going to be definitely very solitary. And they also have sharp body parts for ripping meat. So cats are going to have those claws, and also the carnivore teeth, and then bears will have the same. All right, so this is our black bear. Black bears, for the record, come in all different kinds of colors. They're not just black. They can be brown, they can be cinnamon, blonde, lots of different colors. But I thought I'd include this one to show the different sizes between their young and the older ones. So they are omnivores. They do have a diet that consists of meat, berries, insects, but mostly they're going to be gatherers of berries, insects, different kinds of forage. They're going to be between 200 and 600 pounds. They're going to be heaviest right before the winter starts, right before their hibernation. And at this point in time, they're going to be putting on 30 pounds per week to prepare for hibernation. And they're going to be their smallest right around springtime. So once they come out of hibernation, they would have had their babies. They would have depleted all of their fat reserves, and they're generally going to be pretty hungry. So they're going to be very skinny, not as fat as before the winter started. They also have a very strong sense of smell. So one thing that's very interesting about our black bears is that they have a sense of smell that is 100 times stronger than ours. So for example, if you were to leave a like a canned, so let's say you leave canned beans out, they will be able to smell it from a mile away. You can't smell anything. You can put it up to your face. You won't be able to smell anything, but they can smell those beans from a mile away. So it doesn't matter if you have food that is in a can or in a sealed bag or anything like that, they'll still be able to smell it. And they have a opportunistic diet for this reason. So they hunt, but they're also going to forage and eat carrion. And usually with, hunting, they're only really going to go after the weak or the smaller ones. They don't like to put in too much effort to their hunting. And one other cool thing about them is that they can climb trees very well and run as fast as 35 miles per hour. So those big claws are not only used for, I guess like going after prey, but also to climb trees very quickly and to dig. And usually that's the main purpose for them. Then we have our mountain lions. So this is the mountain lion young. They're generally going to have this spotting coloration, while the adults will have this all over orange color. And they're going to be stalking their prey quietly and then pouncing on them. So you're going to see a bear more likely than you are to see a mountain lion coming. Bears are kind of going to be ravaging around. They're not super quiet. If they get into a neighborhood and they're going through trash cans, they're going to be knocking them over and whatnot. Cats are going to be a lot quieter. They have a long, heavy tail. So this is different from a bobcat, which is a lot smaller and only has a bob tail. So you'll definitely be able to tell the difference. And it's going to use its large retractable claws. So it'll slice meat up, and usually it'll kill by either slicing the trachea or the jugular and letting it bleed out. And these cats can grow up to 5 to 8 feet in length. So they're definitely very large, and they can run at a sprint of up to 50 miles per hour. And what do we do when we encounter these animals? There have definitely been many encounters in Nevada of black bears and mountain lions. So it's good to know what you're going to have to do before you have to do it. So with a mountain lion, you want to face the lion and back away slowly. So make sure that they know that you're there. Then the act is up. They can no longer stalk you. They know that you're there. You know that they're there. You want to back away slowly and be large. So you want to make them afraid of you. You want to try to make them realize that this isn't worth their fight. They don't want to have to fight at this point in time. They just want to kind of go about their business. This wasn't worth it for them to stalk you. And then if you have children, you want to keep them close, keep them from running up to the animal, and then try to pick them up without bending, because the minute you bend down, you appear vulnerable. So that will be a time for the mountain lion to attack. But if you are attacked, it's always good to fight back. So that's the number one key, is try to fight if you can. And just make sure that you prevent encounters ahead of time by making yourself known. So it's good to go with like a group of people if you're hiking, like 1 or 2 other people, so that you might be talking, or there might be a large shuffling of feet movement, so that they know that you're nearby and you're not surprising them. With black bears, you want to kind of take a similar route. You're going to want to face the black bear, back away slowly, but also you're going to want to be loud and shout. Sometimes I've noticed that in certain areas where black bears are definitely more accustomed to humans, I've successfully been able to scare away black bears by just yelling at them, "Go bear, go," and they'll usually leave. So they usually don't have a problem. They're not going to be as confrontational, and they usually don't want to cause any problems. So they'll probably just walk away. And a good way to avoid any kind of contact with bears is to make sure that you're keeping your foodstuffs and any smelly items properly stored. So if you live in bear country, only put your trash out right before you're about to have your trash be picked up. And also, if you're camping or hiking out in bear country, make sure you use the bear boxes, follow the guidelines at the kiosks when you go into camp, or if you're camping out in backcountry, make sure you're putting your food away from your campsite and tied up into a tree. So that's the best way to do it, so that even if a bear does find your food, it's away from your campsite where you're sleeping, and also they would have to climb up to get it. And I also just wanted to throw in the honorable mention of our striped skunk. So our striped skunk has this warning coloration, and a little bit about it. It's got an insectivore diet, but it'll eat eggs and other small mammals sometimes. And there's very few predators to the skunk due to their well-known warning coloration and also their musk. So a lot of predators do know about their awful smell, and few predators are successful. And those are usually going to be birds. And there's 2 highly developed scent glands on the sides of the anus that can emit 15 milliliters of musk several feet. So even if you're standing within a meter of the skunk, it can still get you. So that's kind of one thing that they do that's very interesting, and also keeps a lot of predators away from them. So they are tiny but mighty. All right. So before we move on to horned mammals, I'm just going to check the comments. Are bears near Reno? Yes. So we actually do have bears in the Reno area. A lot of them are going to be more toward the mountains. So like over in the Verdi Range area, some by Galena Creek, some might be, over just off of Mount Rose is where you're going to get a lot of the bear encounters. But it's just good to be aware whenever you're out in the mountains, because that's generally where they tend to hang out. They're not really going to hang out down in the valleys as much, but they'll be up in the mountains for sure. All right, and so our last section is just our horned mammals. So let's go through it real quick. So we have 5 horned mammals in the Nevada area, so or in the state of Nevada. So one is our mule deer, which is widely distributed, and it has antlers. Our elk is going to be mostly in northeast Nevada, and that one is going to have these larger antlers that are larger than mule deer and are usually going to be 2 different types of forks. Then we also have our bighorn sheep, which is going to have large curly horns and is generally pretty widespread across Nevada. The antelope, which is just going to be mostly in central Nevada and northern Nevada, although it'll hang out in any valleys. And then lastly is the mountain goat, which is only found in the Ruby Mountains in Elko, Nevada. So with that, horns and antlers are very dangerous to both other animals and animals within the same species. So they can be used for 2 different types of defense. So interspecific, which is going to be between different species. So that's a good way to fight off predators. They can usually use their horns to kind of flick things off of them, or they can put their head down and ram something. So for example, that's going to be our rams of the bighorn sheep. And they'll usually be attacked either by a pack or one singular large predator. And usually these large predators won't go after the biggest, baddest, male in the group. They'll usually go after the young, or they'll usually go after doe as well, or the female. sorry, it's not the same for every species, but the female. And then we have intraspecific, which is going to be fighting off other males. So definitely in the rut, this is super dangerous. And if you don't know what rutting is, it is the basically the mating season for elk and other different types of deer. And it's going to be more frequently resulting in injury and death than interspecific competition. And this is because males become extremely aggressive during this time. So males that might normally be very docile or not really paying attention to you are going to be extremely heightened in terms of their defense. And there's one cool thing that happens with our antlered animals, so our mule deer and our elk. So when they are kind of shedding their velvet, and if you don't know what that is, they actually have this live tissue that goes up onto their antlers. And as the breeding season approaches, they will rub it off on trees or rocks or wherever they can. And it's pretty much a defensive territory that it lets off, like a musk. So they can use this in two different ways: to attract females to their area and also to keep other males away. So it's a pretty cool twofold usage there. But definitely our antlered animals are going to die more often from fighting with each other. And rams actually can fight for up to 24 hours. Just two males will be fighting for up to 24 hours, which is pretty insane. And also, let's not forget about the hooves. So hooves are very sharp on our hoofed mammals. So the best form of defense is used with hooves, and that's for our smaller animals that maybe don't have horns yet or antlers, and then also our females. And the kicks are going to be incredibly powerful. So they do have a lot of very strong muscle in their thighs, and hooving accidents occur a lot actually with hunting and ranchers with horses. So this is definitely not something to take lightly when you are pursuing an animal or anything like that. But they also use this on different predators. So like coyotes, who are lower to the ground and smaller, who hunt in packs. If a deer is being pursued, or any of our horned mammals are being pursued by a pack of coyotes, it's really easy for them to just kind of hoof them off and use that as a really good defense mechanism. And it's also really dangerous to humans, as I was saying. So just don't get too close to them, and be careful when you're hunting. And that kind of goes into hunter safety. So always just be cautious when you're tracking down an injured animal, because they're going to have a more heightened attack response, especially if you don't get a clean shot on them and the animal is injured. They're going to save all that energy for that final attack that they will try to do to save themselves. And males are also going to be rutting, which makes them extremely dangerous. So keep your distance with rutting males. They definitely have a lot more of those hormones and testosterone pumping through their system. They're going to be very defensive of territory. And while normally you might be able to just walk up and feed a doe or hang out with them or just watch them from a safe distance, you don't want to even try to test your luck. So just try to keep your distance when you are around males during the rut. And also don't startle these animals. So startle response can involve hoof kicks. Just make sure that you give the animals plenty of distance, and most importantly, do not feed the wildlife. That is a big major thing. If anything you take away from today's lesson, please just don't feed our wildlife, no matter what they are. Because if you get too close to them and you get hurt because of it, you just want to make sure that you don't put yourself in harm's way because you want to get close to Bambi. All right, so we do actually do immobilization of our larger animals, and we do this when we need to handle them. We'll often use chemical immobilization to safely handle or treat an animal in the field. And traps may also be used in this situation. These are going to be humane traps where the animal is just put into a cage and then moved elsewhere. And the reason, so we'll do this as a control of, we want to make sure that we're doing this properly. So biologists do need to be trained in controlled substances and the creation of tranquilizing substances for this purpose. And we also will consult a wildlife veterinarian, and often they'll be a part of the field team when they go out and do these projects. And there's a number of reasons that we might have to handle animals. Number one is placement of collars or tracking devices. So we want to make sure that we are, have a good tabs on what our animals are doing. If we need to know if there's a certain predator in the area that's causing a problem for the population numbers, or we want to see their movements, or we want to see maybe where they've been going for migration. That's why we use the collars. We might have medical treatment for an injury, and this might involve, animals that are hit by cars, animals that are injured, or, get into a trap on accident. So we definitely want to make sure that we're treating those animals because they're an important part of our ecosystem. And then also removal and insertion to another region. So often if we have an animal that is either putting itself in harm's way, or if it is in harm's way, then we can remove it and put it into an area where it will be safer for itself and others. So we do use additional immobilization tools while they're chemically immobilized. So we'll use restraints, eye blinds, and also be sure to put them in quiet and shaded locations. And we also have someone monitoring their vitals at all times so that we can make sure that nothing results in an accidental injury to them or to us. All right, so lastly, we're going to do an activity. So we're going to test your knowledge just to see, how well you do with identifying some of these animals. So in the chat, I just want you to, we're going to open it up and just say, you can put multiple, it could be all three of them, it could be none of them, whatever you want. And you're going to identify which ones do you think that are venomous based on what you learned today. All right, someone said, let's see, I'll give it another minute for everyone to. All right, so a lot of people are saying B or B and C. So we can definitely eliminate A. So A is not going to be anything that we need to worry about. Let's see, B, yes, that is going to be one of our rattlesnakes. And C is actually not going to be venomous. So it's just going to be B. All right, so B is actually our, I want to say this is the Western diamondback rattlesnake. Yeah. All right, awesome. So everyone did a really good job on that one. That was pretty easy because we got the rattle and we've got that white and black coloration right here on the end of the tail. All right, next. This one might be a little harder because I've taken the most of the tails out of the pictures. All right. Awesome. So with this one, we've got A, which is our speckled rattlesnake. So everyone really did a good job on that one. B is actually going to be a whip snake, so that's not going to be venomous. And then C is going to be our Great Basin rattlesnake. So A and C is the correct answer. So here we go. All right, everyone's doing really good. I'm proud of everybody. Okay. So next we're going to go to the next one. So this is between two pretty much. So which one is venomous in this picture? All right, overwhelming response of B. So yeah, it definitely is our Gila Monster. It's not to be confused with the Chuckwalla. So it is B. B is the correct answer. All right, so this one's a little harder. Which of our spiders is venomous? All right, we got a pretty good variety of people or of responses here. So this one was tricky. The answer was A. So this is our desert recluse, but going back, we have our tangled spider, which does look incredibly similar to the recluse, and also our wolf spider, and those ones are not venomous. So A was the correct answer. All right, we've got one more. So this is our last one. So I think a couple of people got it. This was kind of a tricky one. Technically, all of them are correct. So all of these are going to be delivering venom, but only one of them actually is going to be the venomous one that we talked about today, which is going to be A, and that's going to be the bark scorpion. The other ones are the emperor scorpion and the desert hairy scorpion, which we didn't talk about. Their venom's actually incredibly weak. They don't really cause any problems, but they do have venom. So that was a trick question in this case. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming tonight. If you have any other questions, we'll answer them real quickly. But other than that, there is a questionnaire at the very end. So just make sure that you answer the questionnaire before you shut down your browser. And also thank you for coming. I really appreciate everyone who came out tonight to learn a little bit more about some of our animals and the defenses that they have. What is okay, someone had a question. What is the purpose of biologists counting rattles? So a lot of the times they'll use this for aging or using the health of a rattlesnake. So the rattles are going to be made of keratin, and if they're being, damaged, or if there's not a whole lot, we can tell the age. It's a little bit of a tricky situation. You don't always want to use the rattles to tell age precisely, but it could definitely give us an idea of what this rattlesnake has been through. So for example, if a rattlesnake had like 6 buttons, you can assume that it's probably about 2 or 3 years old, because it might shed like twice a year. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone.